Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss the important issues appearing in the Hindu newspaper dated 6th April 2018. Let's begin. The first important news appearing in the newspapers appears on page number 8. The news reads Skill India urgently needs reforms. There is no way the country can reap its demographic dividend without fixing vocational education. So, this news pertains to the issue of vocational education and it comes under part of GS paper 3, that is under Indian economy and issues relating to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development, and employment, and also inclusive growth and issues arising from it. It also becomes a part of GS paper 2, where it relates to issues relating to development and management of social sector services relating to health, education, and human resources. This topic of vocational education becomes very important to understand both from prelims as well as from a mains point of view. So, this news pertains to the issue of vocational education in India and various issues and problems associated with it. In this regard, you have often read in the newspaper that corporate sector often laments about the unemployability of the youth, and because of skill gap or skill deficiency they are either unable to absorb them in their workforce, or these corporates have to train such candidates, which becomes an added burden and responsibility for them, both organizationally as well as economically. So it was in this respect that the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, to rationalize sector skill councils, which are employer body mostly promoted by FICCI and CII and other industry associations, and to improve Skill India program. The basic purpose of Skill India is twofold, primarily to meet employers' need of skilled workforce and to provide a decent livelihood to such people. So, in this respect, let us go through some of the key reforms of this Sharada Prasad committee, which has suggested for reforming the vocational education in India. This news article also focuses on the various recommendations given by the Sharada committee to reorganize the vocational education system in India. So let us go through some of the key recommendations of the Sharada Prasad committee. The committee was constituted by Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, and this becomes a key important from your prelims examination, as the issue of unemployability of youth is very much in news. Hence, this Sharada Prasad committee and the ministry under which it was constituted becomes very important from your prelims point of view. The committee recommended to create a national vocational education and training system which shall provide for the following. It mentions that every child, irrespective of his caste, creed, religion, gender, region, or economic status, should get 10 years of schooling so that the 3 R's, that is, reading, writing, and solving arithmetic problems, becomes the basic foundation or the basic pillar on which their higher vocational education and training system could be successfully built upon. Thus, for a successful vocational education, priority must be given in the school level to reading, writing, and solving arithmetic problems, as it will help the students in further grasping the foundation and basics of vocational education. The committee further recommends that the vocational education and training should start only after 10 years of schooling, as this is the established norm in most of the developed world. The committee further suggested that each child should be given an option to go for vocational education and training, as he is permitted to choose other subjects like science, commerce, humanities, technical education, etc. In this respect, the government should promote setting up of required number of vocational education and training colleges, where options should be available to a child to choose any of the sectors of his choice of training. These colleges should run vocational courses, but also along with the vocational courses, students should also be taught two academic subjects. And these colleges should also run certificate, diploma, advanced diploma, and degree level courses. In this regard, the Ministry of Human Resource and Development should conduct vocational education and training courses at 10+2 level and align the standards with the National Skills Qualification Framework. They should set up higher vocational education and training colleges and universities. Formalization and institutionalization of vocational education and training courses shall ensure vertical mobility of these college pass outs, absorption of these students into the workforce, and it will also provide a national standard mechanism to run such vocational courses, and it will also help in reducing unemployment on a large scale. This will also address the issue of education in India, and effectively it will also help in reducing skill gap or skill deficiency of such workforce. Other key important recommendations of the committee are that the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship should set up National Vocational University which shall conduct research, train the trainers or professor for higher vocational education, and shall become the affiliating university for all VETCs, that is vocational education and training colleges. So a prelims question on National Vocational University may be asked with respect to recommendations given by Sharada Commission. Another important recommendation of the Commission is that as of now, there are no uniform vocational education training standards in the country. Therefore, the skills imparted to the trainees are not uniform across the country. Hence, the committee has recommended to create a dynamic national labor market information system, national occupancy standards, national competency standards, national accreditation standards, and national certification standards, and align these standards with the International Standards Classification of Occupations 2008. Thus, all these steps recommended by the committee will also help in improving the quality of our vocational courses. In this respect, the government must also know where the problem lies, and the government should gather data on specific industry skills requirement, as the synergy between the government and the private sector will help in addressing the issues of skill requirement, and these data will help the government in making specific policies to fulfill such skill requirement in specific industries. The article suggests that the government can take the help of National Sample Survey Office in this respect. From a prelims point of view, it's important to know about NSSO, and NSSO comes under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and NSSO has four divisions. First, Survey Design and Research Division, Field Operation Division, Data Processing Division, and Coordination and Publication Division. Thus, these points about NSSO becomes very important from your prelims point of view. So, this news regarding vocational education and training and various recommendations given by Sharada Commission becomes very crucial with respect to both your prelims as well as your mains examination, as this news basically pertain to unemployability of the youth as well as skill gap or skill deficiency, and it is in this respect that the commission has recommended various measures to be adopted so as to provide a uniform standard of vocational education and training courses in India. Hence, this news becomes very important from GS paper 3 as well as GS paper 2. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news pertains to RBI's neutral stance on policy rates. This news appears as an editorial on page number 8 as well as on page number 13. So let's see these two news together. RBI, that is Reserve Bank of India, in its latest bi-monthly monetary policy review has kept the policy rate unchanged and maintained a neutral stance. Hence, the policy repo rate under the liquidity adjustment facility of RBI has been kept unchanged at 6%. The RBI has adopted this measure. As per the RBI, the headline inflation is above RBI's medium-term target level of 4%. RBI also expects that financial market volatility and potential trade war pose a threat to the financial outlook. So it is because of these two reasons that RBI has kept the repo rate unchanged. The Monetary Policy Committee has also lowered its projections for CPI inflation for the new fiscal year. The key factors that will lead to lower inflation according to RBI are decline in vegetable prices and moderation in fuel prices. However, in the upcoming year, RBI has pointed out certain uncertainties surrounding the inflation path. These are, firstly, the revised formula for MSP as announced in the Union Budget 2018-19 for Kharif crops may have an impact on inflation. Secondly, the staggered impact of house rent allowance revision by various state governments may push headline inflation up. Thirdly, in case there is any further fiscal slippage from the union budget estimates or the medium term path, it could adversely impact the outlook on inflation. Fourthly, if the monsoon turned deficient temporarily, then it may have a significant bearing on the food inflation. Fifth, firms polled in the RBI's Industrial Outlook Survey expect input and output prices to rise. It is important to know in this respect that Industrial Outlook Survey is a quarterly survey released by RBI and gives an insight into the outlook of public and private companies engaged in manufacturing about their performance and prospects. A prelims question on this particular point may be asked with respect to Industrial Outlook Survey. The question may be asked who publishes or who releases this survey and whether these surveys are quarterly survey, half yearly survey or an annual survey. Hence, if any question pertaining to Industrial Outlook Survey comes, then you know that it is released by the Reserve Bank of India and it is a quarterly survey, and it also gives an insight into the outlook of public and private companies engaged in manufacturing about their performance and prospects. Regarding the uncertainties mentioned by RBI, in this respect, recent volatility in crude prices has also imparted considerable uncertainty to the near term outlook on inflation. The RBI has also taken other decisions with respect to switching back gross domestic product, and this news also appears on page number 13. In this, the RBI has switched back to gross domestic product from gross value added as the main measure of economic output. GVA, that is gross value added, is a measure of total output and income in the economy from the producer's side, whereas GDP, that is gross domestic product, is the economic output from the consumer side. GVA provides the rupee value for the amount of goods and services produced in an economy after deducting the cost of inputs and raw materials that have gone into the production of those goods and services. The GVA also gives sector specific picture like what is the growth in a particular area, industry or sector of an economy. Whereas GDP is the sum of private consumption, gross investment in an economy, government investment, government spending, and net foreign trade, that is, export minus import. The switch to GDP is mainly due to conformity with international standards. RBI has said that GDP growth will strengthen this year and it has forecasted a growth rate of 7.4% for the year 2018-19. The RBI said that this will happen on the back of revival in investment demand and sustained improvement in global demand. Thus, in this news, we saw that RBI has switched back to GDP from the concept of GVA as a measure of economic growth. And we saw the difference between GDP and GVA, that is, GDP is a measure of economic output from the consumer side, whereas GVA is a measure of total income and output in the economy from the producer side. GDP is a sum total of private consumption, gross investment in an economy, government investment, government spending, and net foreign trade. Whereas GVA provides the rupee value for amount of goods and services produced in an economy after deducting the cost of inputs and raw materials that have gone into the production of such goods and services. And also, GVA gives sector specific picture of growth with respect to a particular area, any industry, any specific sector of the economy. Thus, this news also becomes important from a prelims point of view as difference between GDP and GVA may be asked in a statement based questions. This news pertains to the economy section of UPSC syllabus. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 11 and this news is about GM mustard. In this news, the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee has allowed the commercial production of mustard DMH11, also known as GM mustard. And here DMH stands for Dhara mustard hybrid. So in this respect, let us understand about GM crops. GM crops or genetically modified crops are plants used in agriculture, the DNA of which has been modified using genetic engineering methods. In most cases, the aim is to introduce a new trait of the plant which does not occur naturally in the species. Mostly, genetic engineering is used in crops for high yield and pest resistance. However, the consumption of such genetically modified crops has been a debatable issue in the past. In this case, GM mustard has been developed by Center for Genetic Manipulation of Crop Plants, which is in the South Campus of Delhi University. This project was funded by Department of Biotechnology and the National Dairy Development Board. And the technology used in the production of GM mustard is known as Barney's Barster technology. So how is this technology used in preparing GM mustard? Mustard is predominantly a self-pollinating crop. Thus, a pollination control mechanism has been developed to disallow self-pollination and encourage cross-pollination for hybrid seed production. Thus, so far, we saw about the technology used for GM mustard, that is, mustard is a self-pollinating crop, and in this respect, pollination control mechanism has been developed which disallows self-pollination and encourages cross-pollination. This becomes an important information from your prelims point of view, as statement-based questions may be asked with respect to GM mustard. Another important information from pre-point of view is this technology named as Barney's Barstar technology, which has been used in the production of GM mustard crop. Another important aspect which becomes important is that it is funded by Department of Biotechnology and National Dairy Development Board. And GM mustard has been developed by Center for Genetic Manipulation for Crop Plants at South Campus in Delhi University. As you can see, a question on Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee has already been asked in the year 2015 in the prelims examination. The question read, the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee is constituted under the Food Safety and Standards Act 2006, Geographical Indications of Goods Act 1999, Environment Protection Act 1986, Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Now this piece of information will help you in answering this particular question asked in the year 2015. Here it reads, the Genetic Appraisal Committee is the apex body constituted in the Ministry of Environment and Forest under Rules for Manufacture, Use, Import, Export and Storage of Hazardous Microorganisms, Genetically Engineered Organisms or Cells 1989 under the Environment Protection Act 1986. Hence, the answer to this particular question is Environment Protection Act 1986. The rules of 1989 also define 5 competent authorities, namely the Institutional Biosafety Committees, Review Committee of Genetic Manipulation, Genetic Engineering Approval Committee, State Biotechnology Coordination Committee, and District Level Committee for handling of various aspects of this particular rules. So, some of the name of these committees can be asked in your prelims examination. A question may be framed in such a way as name of some of these committees may be given, and you can be asked that these committees functions under the administrative control of which ministry. So the answer would be Ministry of Environment and Forest. Thus this news with respect to GM mustard becomes important from your examination point of view as it gets covered under the environment section. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next important news appears on page number 10, and the news reads, Government forms committee to regulate news portals. In this news, the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting has formed a 10-member committee to regulate online media. The order of the ministry said that content on private television channels are regulated by Programs and Advertisement Codes under Cable Television Networks Regulation Act 1995, whereas the print media is regulated by the autonomous body Press Council of India. But no such regulation exists for online media. Thus, it is in this respect that the ministry has constituted a 10-member committee to regulate online information dissemination. The committee will also devise rules to modulate news portals and media websites, keeping in mind the extent of FDI norms allowed in media, and to analyze the international scenario on such existing regulatory mechanisms with a view to incorporate best international practices. Thus, the committee will suggest and frame regulatory framework for online media websites, news portals, digital broadcasting sites, including entertainment and infotainment sites, and news media aggregators. Thus, this news becomes important from a prelims point of view. And it is important to understand that in India, the television channels and advertisements are regulated through Programs and Advertisement Codes under Cable Television Networks Regulation Act 1995, whereas the print media is regulated through Press Council of India. However, for online media, no such regulation exists as of now. So it is in this respect that the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting has constituted a committee. The members of the committee shall include secretaries from different ministries, including Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Ministry of Home, Department of Legal Affairs. Apart from the secretaries, the committee shall also have representation of Press Council of India, News Broadcaster Association, and Indian Broadcasters Federation. Thus, this news with respect to committee formed for regulation of online website media and news portal becomes important from prelims point of view, as questions may be asked with respect to regulations of television and advertisement, print media, as well as online media. And it's important to know about the terms of the committee. That is, what is the committee entitled to do? That is, what shall be the committee looking into? It will basically regulate online information dissemination, devise rules to modulate news portals and media websites, and analyze international scenario on existing regulatory mechanisms so as to incorporate best international practices. Thus, this news with respect to committees becomes important from your pre-point of view. With this, we come to an end to today's newspaper. Let's move on to the question for the day.